The periphery always occurs. Could it be a blessing? Well, thank you for allowing me to share with you these few moments of conversation. The topic that I chose in connection with the general theme of this session has to do with my comment on a particular group of people who inhabit the peripheries. Not natives, not peasants, not the very members of the scientific communities that grew in these new nations, ensuing decolonization. That is, physicists, chemists, biologists, engineers, economists, very different people, but also anthropologists that inhabit the periphery. For decades, scientists and intellectuals in what came to be known as the Global South have complained about peripheral conditions, marginalities, asymmetries, exclusions, invisibility, backwardness, underdevelopment. However, we cannot forget also that the grievance was also voiced at different times in the so-called advanced countries, with reference to their disregarded hinterlands as producers of irrelevant, backward science. Some of us sought to understand what was involved in peripheral science. That is, the scientific activity carried out by people from the former colonial and new countries in the South, usually lacking scientific traditions, with poor, insufficient infrastructure, scarce presence of rigorous criticism in the social milieu, international invisibility because of lack of recognition of what they were doing, and interested in research topics that were commonly disregarded by the mainstream that considered them redundant and unglamorous. Well, but although the periphery did not interest the center, scientific activity grew there anyway. And in Latin America in particular, the term burst into academic and public discourse, particularly since the 1980s, seeking to explain an important social change that had occurred there. There is the growing regional and national production of science. Such developments introduced a buzz in the concert of canonical international science, since they highlighted specificities and nuances of scientific activities in the usually marginal context. Why? Because cultural diversity inevitably breeds novelty. But taking some anthropological images of this, we have Apadurai's image from 1986 that says, in a paraphrase, Latin American science, we might say, that still looked like an anthropological black hole where a variety of ideas, findings, and possibilities would vanish from the metropolitan gaze. Or we can take another one, Hannah's, in around 2010, I think. It might be said that anthropology, as a global discipline, has not managed to create a cosmopolitan public commentary such that the broadest perspectives in relation to mankind are clearly evidenced. So the problem is with lost knowledge to the world. Tension and ambivalence in the position of intellectuals who were spatially part of the periphery, but whose mental maps, because of their professional education, revolved around the metropolis, have long been perceived not just as painful personal experiences by scientists and intellectuals from the peripheries, but as having overall damaging effects on science because of the knowledge loss. Parallel to this, The internet phenomenon that emerged seemed to push the world towards a kind of global ubiquity that was expected only to intensify. A couple of decades ago, for example, cultural theorists like Manuel Castells from Spain were describing how globalization breeds sameness and monotony, charting the declining importance of physical geography. But contrary to what was expected, we currently witness a world where a process of fragmentation unfolds. Uncontrollable violence fueled by a series of what we might call endemic, present, hatreds of immigrants, minorities, of the various so-called others. That is rampant. The local worlds, on the other hand, include remote provincial groups, marginal communities, and heterogeneous actors, be they scientists, businessmen, civil society, indigenous groups, peasants, and other people. That is the classical world of anthropology. But despite abundant rhetoric to the contrary, the deep prioritization, or I don't know whether that word exists, deprioritization of the local is a real problem. A common reaction to discourses coming from distant provincial territories is to either ignore, minimize, or dismiss them. Scientists working in such regions must deal with this when they wish to prove the value and applicability of their own research. The mention and inclusion strategy that is often found in discourses at the national level of decision making produces the effect that merely lip service is paid to local critical voices that continue to remain outside and to be irrelevant. It is as if the mere mention of them already includes them, but it's not true. They are not even looked at, not paid any attention at all. Well, I would like to comment very, very briefly on a recent research study that we carried out with other colleagues, investigating processes around mining, salmon farming, and wildfires in both Argentine and Chile and Patagonia, enhancing their territorial nature. In view of the negative impacts such extractive activities have on the environment, scientists in both countries tend to support local research lines strongly consistent with their territories' particularities. That is, there is a local gaze that is very concentrated there. But while local environmental conflicts and socio-technical controversies move scientists, governments, and citizens fundamentally to build decentered research agendas, the nature of extractive activities actually articulates territorial specificity with concerns of global agendas around climate change and its effects, conditions, and causes. Thus, we witness that relationships between micro-territories and global macro-transformations induce a rich micro, meso, and macro dynamic. Ongoing political debates in Chile and Argentina are a major part of the concern about new claims to the spatial organization and use of the territory in both countries. Decentralization aims to give rise to broader, more interconnected networks, especially at the margins, in which power has been redistributed. Decentered knowledge seems better able to face today's great challenges. Distributed agency, produced through decentralized decision-making processes, responds to the need of recognizing other different people as knowing subjects within epistemic communities. So the time seems to have come for local anthropological contributions to gain a place in metropolitan sociopolitical discourses. Anthropologists are intervening actively and increasingly as individuals and as collectively organized political subjects in public and state arenas where major issues are debated. The resolution of existing tensions will depend on how the combined dynamics of centers and peripheries evolves in the reproduction and correction of asymmetries, including other voices, epistemic perspectives, and knowledges that have been obliterated by the cognitive imperialism in remote outposts. Anthropologists then are in a privileged position to accompany these processes. Thank you.